Hey everyone, welcome to the second part of this painting, and we are going to look at how we actually create more wall textures. And using my brush, I'm just trying to darken the shadow right here that is cast by the wires that is hanging very near to the walls. Right, so this part of the wall here is blue, and so I used some dark blues to actually show that the shadow is actually consisting of different kind of blue components. And I'm just using my brush now to kind of like very quickly make sure that all these blue walls, the blue paint is being applied completely to fill up this blue wall, right? So it's very important for us to make sure that we have all these different colors for the walls. And you can see that on the wall at the top right there, it is actually brown in color, and this brown can be combined with some dark browns as well, and mixing with some water that will give you this very nice kind of browns. And this brown can be combined, this light browns can be combined with the blue right there, and you can see that there's a very nice transition from the blue all the way to the brown right there. So using my small brush, I'm just trying to very quickly make sure that we have all these different kinds of textures and browns and so on and so forth. And it's really important for us to use our brush to just make sure that all these areas are being filled. Right, so using my brush, I just kind of like do this part which is really dark, and so this part is actually underneath that shadow, right? So I'm using this very dark blue kind of paint to paint this area where there's like a really dark tone, and this is actually a window that actually shows that there's an opening. And so when you actually look inside, it is like completely dark. But of course I used colors like purple, dark blue, and also browns, and you can see that surrounding that area that we just made, I used some browns to actually help me to paint the rest of the dark areas, right? So by combining dark blues and purples and dark browns, that will really give us all these very nice kinds of dark tones that you're seeing right now. And of course leaving white for some of the wires and some of the details, and using my small brush just trying to complete a lot of the kind of details and shadows that you see. Alright, so moving on to the wall right here, which is just beside that window, that opening. You can see that I'm actually using my brush to kind of like mix a little bit of those light blues and browns together, and this will actually give me all these very nice kind of textures. Right, so I used a gray tone and soft edges to paint the shadows. So this shadow again here is being cast by those wires onto the wall, and you can see that I painted the base layer of the wall first with that light wash, and then later on I'm using this small brush to help me with the painting of these shadows. And right here we have all these shadows that are being painted with some of the soft edges. And so using this small brush, this is actually helping me to make sure that the middle part is actually dark, whereas the surrounding part, those near to the edge, is being softened by trying to when I actually dipped my brush into the water and blending and softening the edges, and thus making the edges soft as it combines very nicely with the rest of the wall. And so using my brush here, I'm just trying to create another shadow, and I'm just trying to make sure that we have all these shadows in, and we have this jagged kind of edges is not really straight, and just trying to make sure that we have all these shadows that are of different thicknesses, and again using my small little brush to help me with painting and to soften the edges of the shadows. So making sure that the shadows have all these soft edges, and we can also use some tones of brown to actually help me to make the shadows look more brown. Right, so just trying to use my small little brush to help me with all these softening techniques, all the kind of a blending and trying to make more textures on the wall. And you can see right here that we have all these, very nice shadows that are formed. So you can also add, use your fingers to kind of like smudge some of the textures. And right now you're seeing, all these different shadows and all these different kinds of paint and marks that are being made onto the wall using those browns and using those dark blues. And this is very important for us to make sure that we have all these different tones on the wall. Right, so we are now moving on to the shadowed area, and as you can see right there, there's a line that separates the portion that is under the sunlight, and of course the portion that is underneath the shadow. Right, so the portion that is underneath the shadow is actually much darker, and you can see I used different kinds of gray to actually represent these areas. And after painting the entire wall, I actually used my fingers to remove the masking fluid from those wires, and then painting a lighter color to form those wires. So I used cool and warm tones to paint the wall. Like we used brown and also used some dark blue. So these are some of the cool and warm tones, and right now I'm actually using my brush to make sure that we have this kind of a brown and also a bit of red. So red combined with brown to make sure that we have all these patterns, all these like worn out kind of posters and things that are on the wall, and just trying to use all these shapes like rectangular shapes and all these irregular shapes to show the details of all these writings and all these like posters and all these things that you find on the wall. And so using my brush, just trying to make sure that we have all these very, very nice kinds of textures and details and all kinds of colors that make up this entire wall, where there's this orange and there's this red, and there are all these borders that you're seeing right now. So using my larger brush, just trying to make sure that we have these things. So the thing is, we don't have to depict very accurately the writings and all the words on the wall, because it is for one reason they are very far away, so we can't really see it. And the second reason is it is underneath the shadow, so because of the shadow that is cast, we can't really see it clearly as well. And also some of the writings are also not as clear because of the worn out kind of a texture, and because of the thing being there for a very long time, and so because of the weather elements, those words are being washed away, and there's no need for us to kind of like add a lot of those words and writings, and that is not necessary when we are painting this area which is very far away from the viewer. Right, so just trying to make sure that we have all these different kinds of colors and patterns and different brush techniques. So using my brush, I'm just trying to make sure that we have all these colors and dark blues and dark grays and light grays and all these warm tones as well, like reds, grayish reds, like reddish grays and browns and blacks and dark browns. So all these colors are actually making up this part of the wall. As you can see from the painting right here, we have these browns and we have all these light browns and all these yellows, and again trying to make sure that we have the separation between the light areas and the dark areas. So you can see very obviously that the dark areas are underneath that sunlight, the dark areas are underneath that shadow, and so we are seeing all these dark tones, whereas there is a stark contrast between the light areas and the dark areas. Right, so now I'm using a small brush to kind of like paint the words, and here is the first kind of place where you can see the words quite clearly, and I actually use my small brush. But then again, you can see that the words are actually not being depicted very clear as well, because I just want to make sure that we have some writings and some English letters, but the writings and the letters are not exactly that clear, and you can see that it's written there Golden Lodge. So I purposely make sure that the G and the rest of the letters like D and G in Lodge are darker than the rest of the letters like L and O. So this is to make sure that we have all these different kinds of thicknesses, different kinds of lightness and darkness in order to depict all these different kinds of letters that you're seeing right now. Alright, so using my brush, just trying to make sure that there are some dark areas on the wall itself with all these, dark blue strokes and dark brown strokes, and using some quick movements. I use my small brush to kind of like make all these very quick movements and just very quick flicks on the brush that will create all these different kinds of darkness and dark places, dark tones. And using my my brush just to spread out the dark blue area into the brown. Right, so we have all these, different kinds of colors and different kinds of words and all these different patterns on the wall. And you can see right now the wall on the right hand side is actually starting to form, and we will use the brush to continue painting some of the areas on the left hand side. Right, so we have all these, like light yellows and light blues, and we're using this yellow here to depict this part. Again, we don't want the color to be too strong, and so I used some of the brown to kind of like tone it down. And I also used my brush to continue painting some of the shadow areas on the areas that is cast by that by those wires. So just trying to paint those shadows, and let's continue on painting into this part where there are more writings. So this yellow part that you're seeing right now that is underneath the sun, it is much brighter than those areas that is not underneath the sunlight. And so here it's Baba School of Music, and of course trying to use some of those shadows to make sure that there are some patterns on the this poster, this writings right there on the Baba School Music. And I used a lighter tone to paint the brighter areas. Right, so previously we've seen how I used a darker kind of yellow, but here underneath the sunlight it is actually depicting the lighter yellow. So you can see the differences in tone because of the sunlight and the shadow. Right, so right here I'm actually using some of the reds, and you can see I'm actually using pretty light red, this cadmium red, to once again also paint this part where there are some writings there, and it's part of the wall. I'm just trying to use different tones of red to depict all these different colors and different kinds of patterns and all these writings. And I'm just trying to make sure that there are all these like light tones and darker tones on the wall itself, and that will really give us a lot of very, very interesting kinds of patterns and wall textures and lightness and darkness and so on and so forth. Right, so using my brush, I'm just trying to make sure that we have all these different patterns and different kinds of things that we see on this wall itself. And so you can see that the wall is actually coming out very nicely with those areas that are dark and those areas that are light, and of course those patterns that are formed because of the shadow, and that can really give us this very, very nice kind of effect. So right now I'm leaving white for those patterns on the wall. You can see there are some writings there, and they are now being left white, and I'm just using my brush to kind of like make sure we have all these different kinds of reds and different patterns that are being left white. Right, so the reason again to use the different kinds of reds is to make sure that there are more interesting kinds of subtle changes within that same object itself. So once it's dry, I'm just using a lighter kind of red to paint onto those areas that were left white. So here using a dark tone, a dark brown, to kind of like show the shadow areas, and again using the reds to kind of like paint the rest of the areas. So after everything is dry, I'm kind of like use my brush to paint those shadows that is shining on top of those words that we just did. Okay, on that red and yellow area, we have those shadows cast by the wires, and just trying to continue on using my small little brush to paint the rest. Right, so we have the writing there, spa, and this is on a grayish kind of background, And of course we have all these dark areas and light areas, and that is important for us to have all these different tones. So we have also this bunny cafe, and just trying to continue on painting this orange and painting this orange kind of tone that makes up most of the wall. Right, so we have this orange wall, and in this painting we can see that the orange wall is actually combining with the blue wall on the left, but this part here is actually the orange wall, and I'm just using my brush to kind of like make sure we have all these, you know, different kinds of orange and different kinds of light tones, and you know, different kinds of yellows as well to combine with that orange, and that will help us to have all these different tones. So we can use a little bit of red, because red, orange and yellow are in the same color zoned in that color wheel, and so we can, you know, combine with these yellows and orange and reds, and this will help us to achieve all these different subtle kind of effects when we have, you know, all these kinds of colors that are being mixed together. Right, so we have this yellows, and I'm just trying to combine this yellow with some orange as well. So just very carefully just painting this area, and so again you can see that the line there is actually separating between the shadow areas and the light areas. So just try to make sure that the shadow is actually forming very naturally on the wall, just trying to soften that part, just trying to make the line there much more natural. Right, so just making sure that we have the paint being applied in the right places, not trying to go out of that line. And using that orange, I'm just trying to make sure that we have all these different kinds of tones, like orange tones, light tones, dark tones, and all kinds of different tones and, you know, colors within that same little area of orange wall. Right, so just using my small little brush, just using this brush to kind of like paint more yellow tones, and using my small brush to paint some of the details, like some of the shadows, some of the dirt, some of the patterns on the wall, and using my fingers to help me as well. So trying to blend the posters that are being worn out, you know, as they fade into the wall at the bottom part, and using my brush to kind of like make sure we have all these yellows and reds and so on and so forth. And this is very important again to, you know, blend everything together so that they look natural. And you can see right here, this part of the wall is actually almost done with some of the writings, again using that light red, and you know, we can see the word yoga and so on and so forth. So we have all these different things like Baba Music School, yoga, and Golden Lodge, and so on and so forth. So again, this shadow area on the orange wall is actually made up of brownish orange, which is a kind of which is a darker tone of what we actually did just now, that orange, right? So using that brush, just trying to make a darker tone for the shadow, and using my fingers again adding the white paint on the wall. So this adding of white paint using my fingers, you know, just putting my fingers onto that white gouache and dabbing the paint onto the wall surface is a very, very nice kind of way to add more textures to the wall itself. And you can see right now it looks more rustic, it looks more natural, it looks more like there's more things on the wall. So that is a very, very good technique. Right, so just trying to finish up this technique right here, and just trying to make sure we have enough of those white paint, and adding on to the areas that were done previously as well. So this white paint there again looks pretty cool on those writings, and we're just trying to, you know, use the fingers to spread out everything, just trying to make sure that it's not like too much white paint on there. So just dab onto the wall kind of surface, and then use the fingers to rub it from left to right, and that will give us a very, very nice kind of a texture on the wall. Right, so using the finger right there, just trying to make sure that everything is coming together. and I'm just trying to make sure that we have this brush that helps us to darken the shadows as well. Right, so just touching up with my fingers and using some of the yellow paint to continue painting some of the areas so that it looks more complete there. And we're coming to an end of this part of the painting. Alright, so using that brush, we have seen how I actually use different tones to depict the shadow areas, how we have done the shadows cast by the wires, how we can do the writings on the wall with different tones and different thicknesses for the letters, and of course different kinds of colors like red, yellow and blue, and of course this orange walls and how we can use our fingers to add all these white paint, this white gouache on top of the wall surface, and how we can combine the posters and the writings on the wall with the rest of the wall. And of course using that darker kind of orange brown for the shadow that is cast on the wall. And right now I'm just using my brush to kind of like paint the rest of the shadows that are cast onto the wall itself. Alright, so I'm just making sure that all these shapes and colors and tones are being added, and just trying to make sure that everything is well placed, and we have come to the end of this presentation. Hey everyone, it's KY Tom here. Thank you for watching my video. If you enjoyed my video, please hit the like button and comment down below. Do consider to subscribe to my channel for more art videos. Check out the links on the description below to find out more about my art, and I hope to see you in the next one.